Loose White dive on it.
This is twice now the Celtics have been first to the floor.
They try to save with Harper. Unbelievable.
Boston first to the floor. So good.
Brown fakes, fires up the three. Bang! Tatum dives on the floor. Everybody dives. Jaylen Brown with the flush. Blocked by Porzingis. He's doing it all. Tatum spinning, driving, layup. Got it. Washington drives. Blocked by White. Oh, what a block from Derek White.
All right, welcome into the First to the Floor podcast. Ben Vallis here, along with Wayne Spooney and Jake Eisenberg. There are trades happening all over the place. We just did a pod on the Drew Holiday trade this morning, which you can find on our channel, obviously. But right now, our focus is on tomorrow's NBA draft. And for that, we welcome back Ben Pfeifer, sports editor for Basketball Insiders and a litany of other amazing basketball publications. Thanks for joining us, Ben. How you doing?
Thanks for having me. Still reeling from the Pacers loss a little bit. But, you know, I tell people who ask me how my life is, I'm like, sports, miserable. Everything else, pretty good. Can't complain too much.
Yeah, we have on the run sheet here just Pacers wellness check for Ben. Like, yeah, man. I mean, obviously there's a little bit of a share, like empathy with the way that the Celtics season ended and Tatum rupturing his Achilles and Halliburton rupturing his Achilles, and not neither as good, or like comparing them is hard, but like the fact that it happened in not to rip the Band-Aid off and start like digging around in the wound for you, but like I felt the pain in a way. Like the Celtics fans had become like true Pacers fans. Like I'm ready to get the Andrew Nembhard jersey, and they're up even when Halliburton went down, and so just really wanting to see the universe where Halliburton doesn't go down, when he was clearly had a tweet like in the playback room after he hits that third three, like this dude is fucking here and ready to go. And then it happened.
Yeah, as you said, I definitely did notice and appreciate the Pacers Celtics fan alliance that we've had going over the last couple of years after the sweep last year. Where there seemed to be the only fan base that's like, wait a second, these Pacers are actually kind of good, and y'all should be more scared than you are. And then everyone's slowly hopping on. I don't know. I'm trying my best to, separate the absolute disaster ending from just how unbelievable the rest of the run was. And, I guess the magic had to run out eventually, but it running out like that, like, why couldn't they have just lost normally? Yeah. If they lost normally, I would have been. It's really the most Pacers thing, and there are much worse teams to be a fan of. I can't like complain so much about the Pacers, who have been relatively successful across my entire like conscious life, pretty much. Like I started watching basketball when like the Granger teams were pretty good, and then, but Granger, Paul George, Oladipo, Tyrese Halliburton, every Pacers megastar seems to have some sort of devastating career-altering injury, so that's unfortunate. And I'd like for them to just have one normal loss or normal way to end the season like this. But that wouldn't be Pacer basketball. But like I said, I don't have so much to complain about. I could be like a Hornets fan. I don't know.
Could be a Knicks fan as well. That'd be terrible.
Yeah, I could be.
This is definitely a safe space, Ben, so you can do all the sports complaining or life complaining you like while you're on here. Thanks again for joining us. I suppose we should shift our focus to tomorrow's draft. I'm not a massive college hoops fan. I just don't I'm a massive NBA fan. I don't have the sort of the bandwidth to also focus on college hoops. So we're glad you're here, so you can help us digest all the information. And maybe that's a good place to start. Like there's so many voices, so much noise and content creators out there. There's so much to digest when it comes to pre-draft, trying to get up to speed with what's going on and who might be the spicy deep reaches or sleepers or whatever you want to call it. What's your process there as far as processing all of that information? Do you just block everything out and watch and consume college hoops yourself, or is there a litany of resources that you pull in?
It's tough because, like you said, I mean, people like me who kind of cover the draft year round are covering the draft year round, and now all of the people who understandably are kind of league people or people who, only cover the NBA or something like that, kind of getting into it and evaluating everything. There's definitely a lot of like new information. It's kind of a whirlwind at this point, but I always just try to like trust the tape, trust the notes I've taken, trust the evaluations most of these players I've been tracking to some extent for 2, 3, 4+ years. So I try not to let, any like combine smoke or like, rumors or intel, quote unquote, whatever, really impact my evals too much. And I definitely do like, lean on and talk to and, listen and gather stuff from people who I trust, who I think are good evaluators who view things different than me. But yeah, there's a lot of kind of chaos around this time. And I think all of the breadcrumbs and intel about this player, doesn't really have a good work ethic or doesn't want to go here or, had a bad workout or measured like this. It's, it's just not enough for me to outweigh the large body of information that we already have on all these guys, even if it is, interesting and it's content. I get it. It's part of the game. Like I do understand.
How do you weigh like? So I'm a pretty big college hoops fan. I'm a WVU fan, so more Big 12.
Thank God Spoon is here as well.
yeah, carry a spoon.
I've at least heard of a few of these guys now. But like I find like jumping into the draft and like having the addition of like the European players, a lot of them like highly regarded or like at least end of the first round, top of the second round, like. And then I'm looking up the leagues and it's like, how do I weigh, Noah Essengay's performance against like, at least in the college basketball context, I have an idea of like, okay, well, they're playing Iowa. That's a pretty solid team. That matters. So like, how do you sort of contextualize the European prospects against the college prospects?
That's a tough thing to do. And I don't think there's like one like totally correct answer, right? I do think some people can give European leagues competition levels a little bit too much credit as long as it's not, the EuroLeague or whatever. Whereas something like in the case of Essengay and Saraf, I do think that the German BBL, their first division, is probably closer to like good power conference college basketball. Whereas like the French league, I'd say, is a level, maybe closer to like high level March Madness than there's, more NBA talent, more high level, Euro talent, more NBA level, pro NBA closer bodies and physical talents. And then, leagues like the Spanish ACB and the EuroLeague are obviously closer to the NBA than they are to college basketball. So, guys who perform in that league, I think it's generally a good sign. But still, I think
where's the NBL? Right at the top, kind of like
just
like
well,
Hornets, Wizards.
NBL's probably go around the German BBL. I just say like generally, there's a great analysis from 2015 by a guy named Lane Vashro who works in the league now, who like use some statistical stuff that I can't get it, that I don't know how it works to calculate pretty much the competition levels, right, of the league, of each leagues. And they found that, EuroLeague was similar to Spanish ACB, which is similar to like, the Pac-10 back then at that point, which is crazy. I'd love to see an updated analysis on this, but also players dominating their competition level regardless is important, I think. But yeah, I tend not to weigh like the lower level international leagues as highly, like the German league or like the Adriatic League is another one similar where like a ton of prospects have come from as well. Yeah,
love that. So I feel like the big question for, at least for me, like as kind of parachuting in is whoever you have at number 3 is kind of really interesting to me because for the most part, the consensus is Flagg and Harper at 1 and 2. And you've gone definitely non-consensus when it comes to your big board here. You have Derek Queen at number 3. So I guess like it's a 2-part question, but it's like, how comfortable do you feel going off the groupthink consensus? Because that's we popped that one in the Discord and people were abuzz with Ben Pfeiffer's number 3, Derek Queen.
As people are,
decision.
Yeah. I'm very comfortable with going kind of against consensus rankings just because consensus rankings aren't super accurate historically, or they're similar levels of accuracy to like the quote unquote draft Twitter or the other ways, whereas like consensus big boards have missed on plenty. Like I'm looking at the 2021 consensus big board that had Jalen Green at 2nd and James Bouknight at 6 and Jonathan Kuminga at 7. Or, back to the 2020 draft when, Wiseman and Patrick Williams and Isaac Okoro were highly ranked by consensus. So that's not something that really like moves me. I'm going to go with what I feel regardless of whether or not it's consensus. Even though aside from like the top couple of guys, I feel like I do have a lot of consensus alignment this year broadly. But for me, what I value ultimately at the top of drafts are ceiling. Definitely, how realistic it is to reach that ceiling. I think Queen has one of the most valuable things in all of prospects, which is incredible shot creation and self-generated scoring. Like Queen, to me, outside of Flagg and Harper, the consensus top 2, is the most dominant creator, advantage separator. I think his passing is super underrated, and I think his defense is honestly kind of underrated, where his concerns are like very obvious, right? Like the athletic testing people are scared by. He doesn't try super hard, but I think it's not like he's this total zero because he has great hands and he's pretty quick moving in space. So if you believe in like the work ethic, which for most of these guys, I tend to believe in because I don't have any reason not to. There's tons of smoke, right? About anonymous source says X about Derek Queen's work ethic. I don't know these guys. These guys who are coming out probably don't know these guys. And even if they did, what's the incentive, right, for teams and whatever to leak always correct information at this point? So I feel fairly comfortable with Queen's projection as a really high level offensive hub, though defensively it certainly is more risk baked in. But it's kind of a philosophy thing for me. Just like with the guys at the top of my board behind Harper, like players who I think really have that like offensive ceiling. And if there were any like guys who I thought were like high level defensive anchors, like a Chet Holmgren maybe, or that kind of level of prospect, that's kind of the tier those kind of guys go in. But I don't think there's any of those players in this draft who are like center-sized anchors with clean offensive projections.
Yeah, Queen is like probably he was probably my favorite player to watch in college basketball this year. It is like ridiculous watching a dude built like that cross people up and get to the rim and then like kick to a corner shooter. It's amazing. So it looks like, because you have him and then I think Fears at 4th. So safe to say, like, one of the primary things when you're ranking your prospects is like primary creation, primary initiator. That's going to leapfrog you over your weaknesses.
For sure. Absolutely. I just think it's so valuable to have. I mean, you see pretty much every great team, whether it's the Thunder with Shea and, J-Dub can create advantages. The Pacers, obviously Halliburton, like Nembhard was a very important secondary creator. Pascal, good self-generated scorer. Obviously Tatum and Jalen and Derek, all these guys, right? Pretty much every great team has players. And I don't think it has to come in like, like you don't have to be a point guard or like a big wing to me. It can come in any package where like, the best players in the world, the best player in the world, probably Jokic, is like a slow high post oriented center. The other best player in the world, Shea, is like a 6'6", 2-guard-ish who isn't the greatest, playmaker in the whole world relative to point guard. So I think just getting those traits, the ability to easily create advantages. And it's not just that. Like these prospects have other things I like they're all really productive at a young age, like Fears and Queen, and then Khan, even in that range, like high level offensive pieces as teenagers in college basketball. Like, they definitely have improvements they need to make, but we've seen we've seen these guys be really effective and dominant in ways at their levels already, which I think is always a good sign for projecting forward.
All right, well, we're going to keep all of that in mind in a second, come back and look at it all through the Celtics lens. Before we get to that, a quick word from our friends over at Prize Picks. Jake.
That's right. Prize Picks time, baby. NBA Finals are over. Sadly, our Indiana Pacers were not quite able to get it done. So we're gonna have to move away from going more on Shea points, which is very frugal for us. Yeah, keep an eye out for the WNBA playback streams we're going to be doing as well. And we're going to be locked in with Caitlin Clark, more on assists and points. She is going to be our captain as we move into the NBA offseason wilderness. So make sure you're following along for that. Download the app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game.
Shout out Prize Picks. All right, Ben, that's cool to hear how you evaluate prospects as a total prospect evaluation noob. It's good to hear that from someone who knows what they're talking about. So shifting that through the Celtics lens, and I think anything that we talk about now, based on what we've seen in the past 24 hours, the landscape could totally shift in the next 24 hours. So this may not stay relevant. However, I thought the way that we'd approach this is like through the multiple scenarios. So we know currently the Celtics have the 28 and the 32nd pick in the draft. There's potential. We've seen some reports of them potentially drafting up to sort of the late lottery range as well. And we might get to maybe the highly speculative maneuver where they trade like Jaylen Brown or Derek White into like Dylan Harper range. So if we've got
Ben's
time, we'll get to that at the end of the show.
Ben's
I'm slightly
obsessed.
obsessed. Yeah, I'm just obsessed with like spicy basketball moves in general. But sticking with what we know currently, which is that the Celtics have the 28th pick and the 32nd pick. What are some of the names that you're looking at that could be potentially like realistically just going to Boston based on like talent available at that spot alone, or like in terms of positional fit for Boston in that range?
So the names that I always fit with them in the mock drafts or like whatever predictive stuff I do that I also like are Ryan Kalkbrenner and Cam Jones, where it feels like the Celtics are so the Celtics, I feel like over the last couple years have been a team where they're so loaded with depth and high-end talent that they can take guys like Jordan Walsh or JD Davison or, Johan Begerin and just like hope that they can develop into rotation players without much concern and like they won a title regardless while doing that. But now, getting off of Holiday, getting off Porzingis, who knows what they're going to do with Hauser or trade Jalen. I don't know. Anything could happen. As we said, this is a very fluid and influx. So I would guess they're going to look for players who can, fill rotation holes, be cheap rotation players on rookie contracts. And I don't think there are very many players in this draft who fit that more to me than Ryan Kalkbrenner, Creighton center. One of the most underrated players in this draft to me in terms of a guy who's talked about like he could go in the second round. Oh, we got the Clips. Wonderful. I think he scored like 45 in this game.
He did.
But yeah, Kalk to me is one of the safest bets in the draft to be a contributor. And one of the players who I compared him to is Luke Kornet, where there's definitely some stylistic differences. Kornet was a high volume shooter before the NBA. He shot the ball more than Kalkbrenner, even though Kalkbrenner improved as a shooter this year. But really smart, tall bigs who are skilled with the ball, who can really finish and protect the paint. Like Kornet's numbers as a shot blocker this year were, and like, just a paint defender were absurd. And I think Kalkbrenner can kind of equate that to some extent, like both very tall, very long, great timing and technique as shot blockers, even though, not like a huge vertical athlete or a crazy strong guy. And I think Kalkbrenner's biggest issue to me is just his like physicality and toughness, where, I feel like sometimes it's nebulous to be like, oh, this guy doesn't have toughness or physicality. But with Kalkbrenner, it's been a thing throughout his entire career where, he doesn't get as deep post position as you'd like. Smaller players can move him off of his spots on both ends. But just as a guy who is going to be an incredible play finisher, he's going to catch lobs, he's going to finish offensive rebounds, he's going to cut, he's going to defend the basket. Like he's not a, mobile switch defender by any means. And he's probably not going to be like a high usage offensive player. Like he's someone who doesn't need the ball in his hands to add value. Like you don't have to ever run a play for Ryan Kalkbrenner to feel his impact. And I think that's what teams like the Celtics want, right? Guys who they don't have to think too much about. And I think Kalkbrenner, though, I wouldn't say he's a lock to be a guy who can really shoot threes and, attack closeouts. I do think he's a better bet than a lot of centers in this class to do that. And obviously the Celtics really like, if possible, for their big men to be spacers, though. Again, we've seen with a guy like Kornet where it's not really 100% necessary. But more than anything, Kalkbrenner is just a good player. I think getting him at 28 would be a straight up value, as of course would getting him at 32. And I think it makes sense, both talent and just, fits with the Celtics timeline and a potential area of need. Porzingis is gone. Horford's getting older. Who knows what the long-term plan with Kornet and like Keita is.
I called Kalkbrenner the most boring prospect in the draft because I think he's like a fifth-year senior. But I would just be like completely and utterly shocked if he's not like a 10, 15 a minute a game center, like at worst in the NBA, because like he's got a 9'4" standing reach. He's like, is he fluid athlete? Is he quick laterally? No, but he like gets in the right spots. And like, there's no doubt in my mind, he will be like a very good or very solid drop defender in the NBA. And then like offensively, yeah, absolutely right. Like he sets good screens and he rolls and he's got good hands and he can finish around the rim. I wonder, like, do you buy the shooting? Because I think he took like 1.7 attempts at 35% this year, but it was kind of new for him. And I suspect he's probably a hard worker. What is his ceiling if the shooting is real? And is it Brook Lopez?
Maybe something like that. I feel like Brook Lopez just is like a different level of massive. Maybe Kalkbrenner could get there, but Lopez is just like the most behemoth of a person. But something similar to that, where Kalkbrenner, you kind of mentioned like the hard worker. I like that he improved pretty consistently. Part of why I like Kalkbrenner more than your average old prospect is, one, he was pretty dominant from the jump. Like by the time he was 19, 20 as a freshman, sophomore, he was a very impactful, good college player. It's not like one of these late breakout guys who wasn't impactful until they were 24 and were older than everyone. And I think his shooting is kind of consistently improved, where his shooting volume in terms of per 100 possessions, 0.3 as a freshman, 0.7 as his second year, to 1 per 100 to 2.5 to 2.9 this year on 34.4%. So not like he does anything but hit open spot ups, but that's all he really needs to bring value, right? Where I wouldn't ever bet on Kalkbrenner to be like a shooter that's so dangerous you have to run him off the line or close out hard in a playoff setting. But I do think it's very within the realm of possibility that he's a player who, if you leave open at the top of the key when you pick and pop, or if you leave open in the corner, he can hit a three and make a defense pay. And that's probably all he would need to be like a pretty quality starting player in the league, which again, if you're getting that in the late first, early second round, that's a steal.
Yeah. And it's tricky right now, as you said, like to figure out what the Celtics need. And at 28, it almost doesn't matter the position. It's like, maybe they don't go guard considering they just traded for Simons. And with this next trade, it feels like he's 20% or 12% more likely to be on the roster for next season. But it's like you could see the Celtics going after a guard or a wing or a big. So I don't know, Spoonie, I feel like we've got some names from the NBA draft Discord as well. But Spoonie, I reckon lay out, who do you want to talk to? Maybe you and Ben Pfeifer can kind of bounce back and forth on Avalis as well. Like if you have someone you want to make sure you get in here as well, we can just keep rolling.
Okay. So the one name, because I feel like there's a lot of split opinion on this guy, and like you said, like Kalkbrenner, maybe he could like someday drive a closeout. Convince me Max Reynaud is not good, because like when I watch his tape, it's like he's driving closeouts, he's shooting threes at like 35.5% on like solid volume. He's like screens, rescreens, dribble handoffs. He just gets into stuff. I feel like his passing vision is very Luke Cornetti, where it's like if it's in the short roll, he moves it. Like he just seems like he would fit perfectly in the Celtics offense, like the defense. He's like fluid-ish, maybe. I don't think he's ever going to be a switch defender, and maybe the rim protection is not good enough. But like, where are you at on Max Reynaud? And like, should I be excited if he ends up as a Celtic?
I'm not crazy about Reynaud. He is very polarizing, and I do actually agree that he's a good Celtics scheme fit. So that would be a bump if that ended up being the direction that they want. But I have a good amount of problems with Reynaud's projection, and just kind of quickly pulling it back to what I said about Kalkbrenner being like, just from a macro perspective, like a a long-time dominant college basketball player. It's not the case with Reno, right? Like it took him until his age 22 season to be a really good college basketball player. And historically, it's, just riskier to bet on players who break out late in their careers. They're, it's not necessarily always the reason. Like the inferred reason is, right, they're maturing physically and mentally, and they're, beating up on smaller players. Obviously, I think that's less the case with just the way that college basketball is trending now, being generally older because of NIL and extra COVID years right now. But my main problems with Reno are, one, defensively. Like I just really have a hard time seeing him being an impactful defender. Like he's kind of mobile, like he has his moments. His shot blocking for a center is average at best. It's good relative to all prospects, but he's got some fluidity and some mobility about him. But overall, don't see him being a super impact defensive player just because of his strength and high end rim protection kind of issues. He's a pretty decent on ball defender against some bigs who can drive. I like that ability, but he's not really a good interior defender, which is why I almost view him as a 4 at times. Where the other thing is, offensively, he has some really interesting traits. And to me, his most interesting trait is definitely his driving, as you kind of alluded to. Really impressive closeout attacker, super fluid, can get in and out of breaks kind of as a 7-footer, which is really impressive. I'm a smidge skeptical of just how good his shot is, where, it's solid across his career. 34.7% on 320 total attempts in his career. Pretty solid, but nothing crazy. And another issue I have with Reno's shooting is his guarded versus unguarded splits, where this season he shot, I believe, above 40% on unguarded catch and shoots and below 30 on guarded catch and shoots. Where I think you can kind of see it on film. He has this trebuchet jumper where he has to cock it back and load it up, and he has some nice touch. He gets some post fades. And I think there's some intriguing upside with him as a scorer, but all of that to me kind of buckets Reno more as a high risk project than a safe bet like Kalkbrenner, because Kalkbrenner just has more bankable NBA skills. I know Kalkbrenner is going to be a great finisher. I know he's going to be a good screener and rebounder. I know he's going to defend the basket. And with Reno, it's I'm pretty confident he'll be a great kind of straight line closeout driver for a big man, but hard to access that if you're not drawing defenses in as a shooter. And if he has some passing flashes, but it's not crazy consistent or anything. Reno to me is a guy who I would take a bet on in the second round. And if the Celtics decided that was their swing at 32, I wouldn't criticize it too hard. I understand it. And like we said, I think it's a good offensive scheme fit, but you add Anthony Simons, that's not a defender. Reno's not a defender. Could get a little dicey here. But yeah, I understand why people like him, but I'm just not huge relative to some other bigs in the class. So I kind of view as safer with not much less ceiling.
So another name that's come up, I'm going to butcher this. This literally just got reported by Steeple Pet. Yeah, and this is in the sort of the trade up scenario, but Kasparas Jakucionis. I've probably completely fucked that up, but
not bad.
Okay, thank you. Well, apparently there's reports of the Celtics potentially exploring trade up opportunities for this guy. How do you see that? I guess how do you evaluate that particular player, and particularly through the lens of joining the Celtics?
Yeah, I believe it's Kasparas Jakucionis. So pretty. Jakucionis. I think it's Jakucionis. These Eastern European names can be tough, but yeah, the trade up situations are definitely interesting. I wouldn't mind I mean, I guess it depends on where they traded up to, right? If they go up to 8 or 9, there might be players I'd prefer to Jakucionis, but I think it kind of makes sense as a long-term upside bet, as another real on-ball bet, where Jakucionis is definitely a project-y type player to me because of all of his major weaknesses at this point. He's a very poor handler. His ball control is really, really, really bad at the moment. There's no real way around that. I think his strength is an issue. I don't actually think he's as bad of an athlete as some people think. I think his burst is okay. I think he can get by guys. Just his strength is a big issue, which obviously, is a problem for most teenage guards at this point. And though I believe in the shooting long term, his efficiency is not great. But I do think there's some real upside with him as a high-level pull-up shooter if he can, get more consistent with his step back, because he's great at creating good looks for himself at 3 off the dribble. And even though he's like aesthetically a really poor driver, like he just doesn't look like he can drive and create advantages at all at the NBA level, which I think is kind of a fair concern. In terms of the actual impact, like he got to the rim, fairly often. He drew a bunch of fouls. He shot 67% at the rim this year, which is great for a guard. So even that's kind of like my cope, I guess, my like optimistic angle for Jakucionis is driving. Because I think if that really works out, then you have a guy who's a pretty, he can drive. He's obviously an incredible pick and roll playmaker. And, hopefully improving that handle will just help so much. Most of his turnovers, like he's a very high turnover player, but most of his turnovers are more resulting from like handling and body control errors. Like he'll have possessions where he just like drops the basketball with nobody even touching him, or like someone will bump him a little bit and he'll drop the ball rather than like making bad decisions or not having vision. Like there's some of those turnovers, but I think the turnovers that he has are more fixable than some other players. So I like Jakucionis. I see him as like a pretty intriguing like on-ball creator upside bet. I just wish he was a better off-ball player. Like that would be kind of an issue I had Boston related with him, because at the moment I don't really trust his ability to play off the ball, largely because of his unwillingness to catch and shoot. A lot of the times you'll see him catch the ball wide open on the wing or the corner. He'll take a dribble, step back, do something unnecessary, and sometimes it goes in, but I'm not a huge fan of his process attacking and making plays off the ball. And, even if he develops into a great player on a team like the Celtics with other offensive stars in place, it's just non-negotiable. Like you have to be able to play without the ball. But I do think, the Celtics are a team that they don't run a ton of, off-ball movement. They don't run a ton of, they're not like an Indiana or like a Golden State in the way that their offense plays. And I do think their offense relies more on like stationary creation and decision making than a lot of other offenses. So from that angle, I think Jakucionis at his ceiling could fit well. Would probably prefer other guys as trade up targets, but I would certainly be intrigued by that. Like I think I'd be curious to see how it goes.
Why not sprinkle in some different types of turnovers next to Jaylen Brown? Because, Jaylen Brown has the lack of vision decision-making turnovers, and why not sprinkle in
I was going to say, if Celtics fans are scarred by his handling turnovers over the years, like they're going to have a blast watching Jakucionis dribble off of his foot for the first couple of years of his career. Like, I think that can improve, as we've even seen with Jaylen. Like, he's gotten to the point where his handle is functional enough that he can create he can create and score as much as he needs to. But obviously Jalen's a way better athlete than Jakucionis, which makes a difference, and bigger. But
Spoonie, I mean, on Kasparas here, and then maybe we talk, this feels like a Sorber spot as well, but like thinking about Brad and like winning at a high level, and even what you said earlier, Ben, about like the creation, like 6'5" guard, like I was, the pull-up shooting, the pick-and-roll ball handling, like you can see that being valuable in high-leverage playoff stuff. Obviously, if like the off-ball stuff doesn't come along, then like that's not going to, matter that much. But like if it does, then if he's going to be able to do this alongside, creating advantages for Jaylen and creating advantages for Jason, like if we start to look forward a little bit, then I can really start to see the vision. It's... And these bets are risky, and like that's what I realize.
If you're going to trade, I don't love trading up generally. I just think trading up is generally too risky. I think most smart front offices kind of operate that way. Like you don't see a ton of, Celtics or Oklahoma City will do it every once in a while, but they're more, they'll trade back a lot. And if you're going to trade up, especially as far as the Celtics, a trade up might involve Jaylen or whatever to, get a top 10 pick or something. I think you want to go up for someone who's like really special or like a high level prospect who's falling in the draft, which I think there actually could be guys available there. But I don't think, as much as I like Jakucionis, like I have him in like my late top 10, early teens, I just don't view him necessarily that level, but also wouldn't hate it. Like I wouldn't necessarily think it's like a horrible pick.
Yeah, Kasparas terrifies me. If we give up assets to move up, man, like that could go very wrong, which
I
is
wouldn't.
scary. I will say like two things about Kasparas. Like one, he hits the roll man, and I feel like nobody in college ever hits the fucking roll man, and he hits the roll man a lot, which to me is like I think that speaks to the way he sees the game, and like the passing is real. And I wonder if we could simplify the game for him a little bit when he's young. Like you said, he doesn't take pull up threes, or rather, he doesn't take spot up threes. Like if we can beat that out of him, he really intrigues me as like an advantage exploiter. Like if Tatum draws two and kicks it to Kasparas in the corner, like his combination of potentially maybe being able to shoot, get downhill, and then read the defense and make the correct read, make like high level passes at times for him. Like that I find really intriguing, but like I would kind of be terrified if we moved up for him, man.
If you have high risk tolerance, then you can kind of go for him. I don't know how high theirs would be, but I think like it's, if you can live with some potential downside, I get it.
Yeah, I've got a couple other names if we're in that like 10 to 15 range. And I was just wondering your thoughts, or maybe pick who you think would be the best for the Celtics. Nick Clifford, Cedric Coward, Thomas Sorber. So like if the Celtics are in that range, like where are you going? Is there another name you think they should target?
Would be quite a big fan of all of those. Not as crazy about Coward in the lottery. I like Coward, but I'm not as crazy about kind of similar to Reno, like an older project-y pick that I just think is kind of risky going up for. But Neek and Sorber like are two of my guys.
I love them. I love them, dude.
I really like that. Neek, I think, would fit in amazingly. I mean, to me, he's one of, along with Kalkbrenner, like one of the most NBA-ready players in the draft. Can do a little bit of everything on both ends. But Neek, to me, is underrated. Because I think one, like Kalkbrenner, like the consistent improvement track is good, and he's a much like higher level creator than I think he gets credit for. He is a phenomenal passer. I did a YouTube video on his passing a couple days ago where I kind of went through like the kind of shocking amount of plays where he like looks off the weak side defenders and hits the roller, or like throws a crazy like over his head pass to a cutter. Like he really has like incredible vision and creativity as a playmaker that I feel like he kind of gets billed as like a jack of all trades, master of none, when to me in reality he's like a jack of all trades, master of some, which is a very valuable thing. And that's a player who I would be comfortable taking in the lottery. I would love it for that. I mean, it would just be so perfect. Like he'd be, because he can obviously play off ball. He's a great spot up shooter. He can cut, he can drive, he can rebound, but he can, actually create a little with the ball in his hands. Like he was and obviously he's not going to have the same role that he had at Colorado State, where he was a primary on-ball creator. But I like my future role players to have had that experience in the past, because it's just going to be easier for them to scale down. Whereas like if you were just a college role player, it's hard to go from being just a college role player to just an NBA role player. Like most great NBA role players, or even good ones, like I think of a PJ Tucker and Alex Caruso, even guys like Dorian Finney-Smith, Torrey Craig, Robert Covington, just like list them off, were high usage offensive players in college. So I think having those skills helps you scale down, and Neek's got that. And yeah, I'm a huge fan of his game.
Same.
I think he's very safe and has more of a ceiling than your average 23-year-old, 24-year-old rookie. And hey, for the Celtics, like again, even though it's a bit of a retool, they're still going to want to be competitive as soon as possible. And adding a guy who can really help you and I think be like an impact starter at his peak is valuable.
You've got him at 12, I see here on the big board. It is interesting. I'm like trying to figure out, well, I mean, like how high does Georges Niang 28 and 32 get you? I mean, and probably not to 1. 2 is probably a big ask. Yeah, but the one that we've actually been talking about is like how high does Sam Hauser and 28 get you? Because like I think that I've been someone who's been very strongly like, I think Sam Hauser, I would just love to keep him. He's just really good and fits. He's 6'8" dudes that like roll out of bed and shoot 42% every year and rebound and can make good passes. Like the person you draft in 11 to 16 is probably not going to be as good as Sam Hauser, but that range, like I don't think Phoenix would do it, but I would never rule them kind of doing anything out. But Portland, Chicago, Sacramento, and Atlanta.
Phoenix.
I mean, yeah, they do need a big wing, I guess. Like he's just a bigger Grayson Allen, and again, they've got so many shooting guards. But Portland, Chicago, at Sacramento, Atlanta, that 11 to 14 range feels like a few like teams that could talk themselves into like actually needing an NBA player now, as opposed to drafting another player. And you just made a trade with Atlanta, so the 13 range for Neek does kind of make sense if that's the range that I think that we can maybe get into. So, Spooner, you like Neek a lot as well, and I know I can hear the Discord yelling at us. We can't brush over Sorber here. Of the guys that got listed, I think everybody listed Sorber as one of their guys that we would like to trade up for.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Sorber. I think the thing about Neek and Sorber is they could both be there later. It wouldn't shock me if both of those guys fell closer to 20. And then at that point, maybe you're in the war room, you see, I don't know, Miami or something, or Washington or Brooklyn or Utah, like one of those picks between like 18 and 22. And you want to go up and get one of your guys. Like that's a much more, Hauser plus 28 plus Sweetener, whatever, can probably get you there if there's someone a team really doesn't like. And I mean, I don't think Sorber should ever fall that far just because he's really good. And there's so many teams in that late lottery range that need more front court help. Like he should not ever get past the Bulls, but he very well could. But Sorber to me is like a perfect Celtics-y guy as well because of his offensive skill. He really is one of the most skilled offensive bigs in the draft, and over the last couple of drafts, I'd say his passing is phenomenal out of the short roll, out of the post, from the middle of the floor. I do have some concerns about his like scoring at the highest level, but the Celtics wouldn't really need him to be a scorer. Like that's not why you're drafting a player like Thomas Sorber. Like even at his peak with a team like the Celtics, he's probably your fifth best offensive player, even though I think he can be a pretty good one. I do have some worries about like his finishing at the next level just because he's not super explosive and he can struggle going up through contact. He's going to have to add a lot of strength, which, again, the case for most players of this age, but it's never a given. It's always something that that has to improve, and hard to be so certain about it. But he is kind of similar to Kalkbrenner, right? Where he's an incredible drop defensive big, great hands, really, really good timing up blocks from all over the place. But I do think he has more mobility than a guy like that. Far from a switch big by any means, but I do think he can get out and move his feet a little bit in space more than your average, drop big, where I wouldn't want Sorber necessarily defending up at the level or switching or, trying to close out long and recover, but he's someone who can survive on the perimeter. And I think that plus excellent interior defense, excellent passing, and some avenues to scoring, whether that's like his fluidity as a driver. I think though he hasn't really shot the ball well so far, I don't think he's a hopeless 3-point shooter. And I think his mid-range shooting is definitely kind of a good indicator. Like he takes some difficult, like off movement mid-range shots, and kind of like Kalkbrenner, right? Like he shoots more than Kalkbrenner did when Kalkbrenner was 19. It took Kalkbrenner until his 5th year of college basketball to really show some stuff as an outside shooter. So I wouldn't rule out Sorber being a pretty solid shooter. And yeah, he's someone who I'd be very cool taking in like the late top 10, if a team really valued him like that and needed a center, like I wouldn't argue with that at all, really. But yeah, I think a trade, like if you can trade up to like, I don't know, 20 or 19 to get a player like Sorber, I think you'd be doing cartwheels. Like that would be incredible.
I have dreams of Sorber in the short roll when Tatum gets trapped and he's just like completely picking apart defenses. It would be so beautiful.
Yeah, that would be just it. I think he fits so well with what the Celtics like to do on offense and how defenses played them this year and try to take them away at times as well. I think Sorber's kind of value as an outlet player could really, really help that.
Another name we've been looking at, like I'm someone who will, like I've mentioned my lack of draft preparation already, but I'll watch like 2 minutes of a highlight reel of someone in college and like immediately develop like a heavy crush for them. Rashier Fleming is a name that has popped up on this show a couple of times, courtesy of Spoonie. I think everyone in all NBA circles, particularly like Brad Stevens, Celtic circles, like love a like 6'7", 6'8", like rangy wing who can shoot a little bit, defend a lot, and potentially develop that shooting over time. Rashier Fleming like certainly seems to fit that archetype. Do you see him as someone like potentially falling into the Celtics-y range, or at least that trade up range for the Celtics?
I think so. I mean, yeah, I agree with you that like the general consensus is like, yeah, this is like a tall, rangy wing that can defend the hell out of the ball and like maybe can shoot, and everyone wants that. Fair enough. I think he's an excellent defensive scheme fit for the Celtics because he's one of the very few best switch defenders in the draft. Like, I have problems with his defense, especially on the interior, but his lateral quickness and mobility and length and ability to like challenge passing lanes and read passes is so good for a 6'7" wing with his incredible wingspan. So defensively, I think he's phenomenal, and I have very few issues projecting him as an impact defender at the NBA level. Like, not super old either. Like, he's not even going to be 21 on draft night, where it's not like he's super, super old. But I'm a fan of his for sure. His offense is definitely a bit shakier. Like, just going to fully rely on whether or not the shooting from this year holds up, which it very well could. But right, this was Rashier's first year of like this level of shooting, where his volume was okay in the past, but he was never able to be efficient. His free throws took a big jump this year. So with that, the volume and the overall, the volume and the kind of the versatility concerns, he doesn't really do much outside of just, basic play finishing and spot up shooting. So not really a high upside offensive player, but someone who could be passable enough, I think. But his defense is obviously what you're going for when you trade up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Spoons, you got me guzzling the Fleming Kool-Aid after your breakdown. Like, the shot looks good. He's fucking huge. Like, Brad Stevens, he's not alone in this, but I'm pretty sure Brad Stevens has said the word shooting with size every time he's hopped on the mic when they've acquired someone, like 8 out of 10 times in the past since he's taken over, basically. Miles Norris maybe being the most recent dude to fit into that category, who we also like a little bit. But yeah, the Flem dog, give us a little bit.
Yeah. To your point, Ben, about his offense, he took 5 mid-range jumpers on the entire season, and he was like,
did he make them all?
Pretty big part. Yeah,
true.
He went 0 for 5.
Shit.
I think, like, for me, it's like the combination of size, 6'8" and a quarter without shoes, so playing at like 6'9.5", 7'5" wingspan, plus athletic, at least I think vertically and in straight lines, and then I think he'll give you like that Obi Toppin, can just like run the floor, pressure defenses that way, finish in transition. And then it all comes down to me is like, is the shooting real? And very good chance it's not, very good chance it is. And I think I just don't think he's going to be like an on ball guy. He's going to be a screen setter, pick and pop, pick and roll, maybe in the dunker spot. But that's the reason he's going to be at 28, right? Like, if he had any efficacy as an on-ball player with that body type and the defensive upside, he would be, in the top 10 probably. So super limited offensively, but the Celtics don't need people who have expansive offensive games. Like, if he can hit wide open threes, can finish off a cut out of the dunker spot, pick and roll a little bit, and then just be 6'9" and athletic on the defensive end, I think that's like kind of a home run at 28. So that's my sell for Fleming.
I'm not even like the craziest, so crazy high on him compared to some people, but even I do agree that I think 28 would be excellent value for him. And even if he's someone they deemed as a trade up target, I would understand that process.
Yeah, so I thinking about like what they're targeting, what they need, like, I still think that Brad Stevens' vision is just retooling around Jalen and Derek. I'm not going to be surprised if in 5 minutes I get a Shams notification that Jalen or Derek are traded, though. Like, everything still feels like it's on the table, but it does feel like Jay's Derek retool around, get younger, get deeper. And Fleming, that feels like if Derek and Jalen and Jason are still on the team and he's able to, and the shooting is real, then that's just a home run role player alongside of those guys. He can help Tatum with the rebounding. Like, I think that if we get to the draft tomorrow and Derek and Jalen are still on the team and we come away with Fleming, I'm going to be feeling really good about like where we're going to be in 26, 27.
So there's a thought offshoot with the whole Jalen being off the team, and like my timeline is like blowing up with potential like Jalen reports and the litany of offers that the Celtics are reportedly receiving for Jaylen Brown. Before we go down that road, that potentially frustrating for Jake Eisenberg road, any other names that we haven't hit on, Jake, Spoonie, or Ben? Like, are there any other names that you consider like dark horses or sleepers or potentially might be a good look for the Celtics?
Can we talk about possibly Spoonie's guy, Javon Small?
Let's go.
I don't know what.
Hell yeah. Possibly. Yep. No, that is my dude. I
don't know if you've seen where I have Javon Small, but I'm very high on Javon Small, and he's someone who like would be a reach by consensus at 32. Wouldn't care at all. Like, it's the second round. Just I feel like one of these clearly overlooked like 3-and-D guard types who has a little bit more skills than your average 3-and-D guard. Like, he's a great passer. I think my favorite thing he does is playing off the ball. Like, pretty much all year he would like shake guys coming off handoff. He's a great passer when he catches on a cut, and his defense is great. He's older and he's not like a crazy creator or, on ball threat necessarily, even though he played on the ball a ton at West Virginia, mostly because he had to, and they didn't really have much else, especially after DeVries went down. There was like very little by way of offensive juice outside of Javon, but I'd say he did pretty admirably considering the circumstance. Like, that team probably should have made the tournament.
Right.
Yeah. And Javon was at the center of it. So, low usage two-way guard who I think has some more skills than just spot ups in defense. Like, his on-ball defense is phenomenal. He's so active, so long. Like, we'll get in passing lanes and, disrupt dribble handoffs. And then offensively, just park him off the ball. He's going to cut. He's unlike, a guy like Jakucionis, who I have problems with as an off-ball player. I think Small is one of the better off-ball playing guards in the class. And I think he's a perfect fit next to teams with big wing-sized initiators like the Celtics, who have two of those guys, and even a guard who initiates who's bigger than your average guard, right? So I think Small is a perfect, like, third guard type where, always risky with these older, shorter guards. Like, you never know. They could disappoint and kind of not carry over that production. But Small to me is combination of like shooting and passing and off-ball feel. And like, he's a pretty solid athlete. Like, he's not crazy, but he has enough of a first step to get into the paint and to beat some guys off the dribble. It's like not an amazing ball handler or anything, but don't think he needs to be necessarily to be like a good player. But yeah, I figured we'd like that one. I'm a huge Javon Small guy. He's like very much like a draft Twitter darling, which is cool. And, I think maybe there, as always with some, quote unquote draft Twitter people, like, there's always someone who's going to have him at like 10 or something. Which, if your philosophy is just like, I want a guy who can play and I'm confident in being able to play, then fair. I get it. But yeah, I love Small. I have him right around 28 on my board. I'd be totally cool with him as a late first guy. And he's someone who you could like buy a second round pick and get. But anyone else that's actually probably going to go in that range. But
any thoughts on Small? But then Eric Weiss, who does like to sprinkle some breadcrumbs of
he does. He knows things.
He knows things. If Boston was drafting in the top 8, who would be like, they somehow find themselves in the top 8 and they come away with this guy? You're like, dynasty back on, fellas.
I think the dream would be Khan. Khan's not falling to 8.
Hell yeah.
Sure.
But, I don't know. They trade up, they call up Danny Ainge and they get 5. Who knows? In like a Jalen trade, or maybe they move up with Washington or something that, they want to trade down and they get Khan. Like, probably the best off-ball player in the entire draft, where I'm a little higher on his creation upside than some people, but like that doesn't even matter that much for the Celtics, where he'd pretty much never have to be the even secondary creator in this iteration of the team. We're like, if you want to go to like Jalen or, Jalen plus Con plus bench lineups, like he could be your primary, bench initiator. One of the smartest players in the draft and one of the best shooters in the draft on the wing is generally just a good combination. Obviously a dominant offensive player this year at Duke. Like Con, while not looking like a crazy on-ball scorer, like he's a really incredible on-ball passer. Like, he's such a great pick and roll passer, has great vision and processing on the move, like rarely makes mistakes with the ball in his hands, and is just an absolute flamethrower, like coming off screens, shooting off the catch. Like he wasn't a super efficient pull-up shooter this year, but did it more, pre-NBA, and Khan was like the most efficient player in AAU like every single year of his high school career. Like he has a long history of being a bucket. And that's like not what he's billed as, right? He's billed as this like lower usage off ball wing, which he can absolutely do. But I think he has more potential than that to be like an on ball guy down the road. But that makes it even more perfect for Boston, where it's like, maybe down the road he develops into that when the team looks a little different. But I mean, I think he could have added value on offense in the NBA Finals this year, where defensively there's more questions. I'm not like so worried about his defense. Not a crazy athlete, not super long, but he's, again, wing sized, very smart positionally. Another guy who like doesn't really make a lot of mistakes on defense. He's not going to miss rotations or mistime his, his blocks or go for bad steal. He's not going to create a ton of turnovers or do anything crazy, but he's not necessarily someone who I think you just like ruthlessly hunt by any means. And all of that comes together to making him like an absolute dream in the top 8. So that would definitely be my, main kind of preference. If they were to trade up for someone, that would be the one that I would like.
On his defense, do you feel like he could be like Sam Hauser-y, where it's just like, it'd be like you don't want to just continuously attack him, but I wouldn't say he's like a plus defender,
I think that's the vision. I mean, he's a little smaller than Hauser, I think, and wasn't that, Hauser, I mean, he's like the white shooter, so he gets whatever rep he gets, but he was always a sick defender in college. Like he was an awesome on-ball defender in college, and he carried that over to the NBA. But I do think that's kind of the broad vision, just someone who's passable, someone who, isn't a major weak link, where the Celtics, hopefully, they'll have Tatum healthy eventually. They'll have Derek White. They'll have good defenders around them. Who knows? Al's going to play until he's 60, whatever. But yeah, I think that's the vision with Khan at his highest end, right? Just like not someone you have to. Well, like I think has similar athletic traits to like a Devin Booker, even, who has at his best been a passable defender for sure on good teams with other good defenders around him. And I think Khan, while never going to be a crazy impactful defender, I mean, I don't think so. Maybe he will be. That would be kind of crazy. But yeah, Khan to me is pretty rock solid. I think is outside of the top 2 guys, probably the safest like impact starter in the draft, and one with higher upside that I think he generally gets credit for. So that would be crazy if they like, obviously it would be crazy, if they make a move up to go into the top 8, like that's probably Jalen or Derek White, right? Well, like there's no way to get that high without trading one of those guys, I would think.
True. Niang, tough to imagine, but
a bunch of cash under the table. Well, yeah. So another scenario, we've teased it, but like Jaylen Brown to the Spurs, obviously other components of that trade, but the framework would be like you'd get the 2 pick in return with a look at potentially drafting Dylan Harper, and some of the very justifiable criticism from the Celtics perspective of that move potentially would be like in the best case scenario, Dylan Harper becomes as good as equal to the talent and productivity of Jaylen Brown. And therefore you wouldn't make that move given the timeline that's sort of dictated by the return of Jason Tatum. Is that something that you would consider putting your mind, yourself in the mind of Brad Stevens and a Celtics fan? Like, would that be a worthwhile pursuit for Boston?
I mean, that would just like be fun, right? Like hey, what if we the price is probably going to be pretty extreme to get up there, but I think Harper can be better than Jaylen, or at the level at least of Jaylen Brown at his best. Obviously, it's going to look very different just because they're very different players. And even though, there's a good chance pretty much every prospect isn't going to be as good as a Jaylen Brown, you get to reset the contract timeline. You get him on a rookie scale deal. You get the extra team control for the next 8-9 years, and that stuff definitely matters, right? Where Jaylen is going to be significantly more expensive, and of course, eventually he's going to decline athletically, and who knows what happens. Where Harper, yeah, the price would be a lot, but if they are really view him as this elite blue chip prospect, which is how I view him, and I think a lot of people do, it makes sense. He's one of the best drivers in some time, incredible getting downhill, finishing at the basket, insanely good, crafty ball handler, probably the best handler in the draft, great passer. I believe in the shooting. I think he has a lot of defensive potential as well when, he's not forced to do everything on the ball. And I think he's a better off-ball player than he gets credit for. He was an efficient spot-up shooter. Most of his shooting efficiency this year was dragged down by pull-ups. He was pretty efficient on catch and shoots, 36, 37%, if I remember correctly. I think defensively, especially in the past, he's been better with more, effort and less responsibility on offense, which of course would be the case in Boston, especially early in his career. It's it's always tough to trade up super high to get one of these star prospects. And from a process standpoint, it's probably not optimal, but I also would think it would be cool. And I do think Harper is a player worth moving up for. At least I think if you do that, you're getting a very, very legit superstar upside, all NBA ceiling kind of prospect.
It's definitely exciting. It's definitely the ultimate mystery box test where it's he could even be Jaylen Brown. And my thing has just been even looking at Chet and J-Dub, right? They won the title based off the collective depth and defense. And Chet's offensive limitations and J-Dub's offensive limitations, as they are in their third years right now, they're going to get better. But if they didn't have Caruso and Kaysen and Dort and they could have their own all defensive team, then they probably don't win the title because the Chet and J-Dub's offensive games aren't there. And if you draft Harper, and is he ready to win with Tatum in the next 3 years? That's just a big ask for any prospect, even if Harper does turn into a top 12 guy. It takes guys a while.
For sure. And I think Harper will be immediately impactful, no doubt. But like you said, with especially, a Celtics team in a title window. But I think the main kind of appeal with a Harper trade outside of how good he is just the cap space flexibility that could bring. But I feel it's probably not gonna happen.
No.
That would be pretty insane. But if that was the move, I do think it would be a part of the motivation would be contract timeline related, where maybe they're we're gonna shoot for 2027, like Eric said in the chat. I'd you popped up on the screen, right? Laura, a free agent. That makes sense, even if if I was in the driver's seat, I probably wouldn't have the balls to pull the trigger on something like that. If it was my job on the line, even though Brad probably has pretty incredible job security at this point, I would guess. Not the move that I would make, but based on how the Celtics are moving, I don't think I'd rule anything out at this point. Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah, that's what makes it so much fun. Who knows, indeed. But I think we're all decidedly more informed thanks to your contributions here, Ben. So thank you so much for joining us. What have you got going on tomorrow? I assume you've got live streams going on, and what have you got to plug?
For sure. Tomorrow on my YouTube channel, which is just my name, I will be live during the draft, both days, plus 30 minutes before and after, breaking down all the picks, reactions, analysis. I'll have guests. It's going to be a fun time. So, if anyone wants to stop by and check that out, drop a like, that would be great. But yeah, I'm just going to be doing more writing stuff, pre and post draft, grades, analysis, winners, losers. I have a big article on a project I've been working on for months coming out tomorrow as well that I'm excited to share. And all of that would be, on my Twitter BJPF_. But yeah, that's about it. Thanks everyone for having me. Crazy time of the year, but definitely my favorite time of the year. No doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you lending your expertise. Spoonie, Jake, you guys are going to be live on this channel as well tomorrow. We will chuck a link to Ben's stream and Twitter in the description as well. Spoonie, Jake, love your work, guys. Until next time, go Celts.